Hi, everybody. This is the voice I have to use for the whole talk. I'm really sorry. I'm here to talk about shadow physics. All right. Yeah. That's my second to last joke. My last joke is Wikipedia defines failure as... all right. I'm Adam. I run this thing called Finji. Finji is our new name for our old thing. We make original games for all platforms. We quasi-publish games by other indies. My co-founder and wife, Rebecca, is speaking at the Rant later today, so you should check that out. Steve gave me the honor of speaking at the Failure Workshop about our troubled project, Portico. It's not a stigma. No, it's good. I believe in failure. I think it's positive, and you'll see why. So this is the story of how we went from a game that looked like this to a game that looked like this to a game that looks like this, and why that took like 4 years. And why that's actually totally okay, and some of what we learned while we were doing it. So let's go back to 2011. Ludum 48, number 20, I made a thing called Grave Robbers. I don't remember what the theme was. I do remember that I did a really bad job of following it. They give you scores, and the score for theme was like 0. The idea was to make a reverse Indiana Jones game. I was really inspired by games like Spelunky and Quap. This is, oh wait, these are videos. I'm sorry, dudes. So in this game, these little dudes kind of like come down, and you like press different keys, kind of like Quap, and you try to like smush all these dudes with different Indiana Jonesy temple death traps. So instead of being Indiana Jones, you play as the temple. I was like, man, I am really smart. This is the best game ever made. And it scales really, really badly. It's like pretty boring, and then when there's too many guys, it's impossible. There's no middle ground. So yeah, I was inspired by these games, and then this is another prototype I made around the same time. It was totally unrelated. I was like, oh, I figured out how to make a match 3 Zelda game. And you have your Zelda inventory, and you match it up against rows of guys, and the different items have contextual actions. It's got all this Zelda stuff, like wait for the guy to move his shield, and then you can hit him with the sword. It was awful. It was really terrible. But that was inspired by games like Clash of Heroes, which is one of my favorite kind of turn-based puzzle-y kind of games. And then I abandoned both of those projects for at least 2 years. So then in 2013, we had some rough times with a former collaborator. We lost about a year of production time. We lost tens of thousands of dollars, not counting kind of uncountable lost sales from late releases. This process took approximately 2 years, roughly the space from 2011 to 2013. Just a coincidence, probably. I was anxious and upset a lot. I was desperate to sit down and just make something and enjoy the process of making again. There was only one thing to do: call Alec Koloka. You might know him from Night in the Woods, or Aquaria, or Towerfall. But back in 2008, we made a thing called Paper Moon, which was really fun to work on. We actually worked on at least 3 other projects since then that just kind of didn't work out for one reason or another. And so we started... we were both kind of bored, and we just wanted to make more stuff. And so we found this, and we were like, hey, maybe we could make that into a thing. So we ported it to Unity. We tweaked a bunch of stuff. We made a logo. We announced it. This may have been slightly premature for a whole bunch of reasons. But we had this really good hook. Smoosh dudes, death is money, buy more traps. Smoosh dudes, death is money. This video game. So we did all this concept art, we did a bunch of iteration, and then we realized that we could adapt the current controls to gamepad, and that would be super cool. So we designed a player avatar, we did a new control scheme for it, and that game looks like this. So you fly around with the gamepad, and it kind of like highlights good places where you can build a thing, and the place where you build a trap has different money values, which is what those invisible gems are on the wall, and you click the thing, but as you collect the gems, it powers up the things where the guys come out of, and as soon as that thing is full, it's going to open another thing that comes out. But as you fly around, you have 2 buttons. One of the buttons is for build a trap, and one of the buttons is for kill all the guys that are near that trap. And it actually has to be able to highlight 2 things at once, so it can highlight the trap that you're targeting to use to attack guys and the best tile to use to build the new trap. This is a quote from the development blog after we were showing this to people. Quote, as I dearly hoped, we do seem to generally be on the right track. So the takeaway for that, I think, is that I'm a really optimistic person. So A little bit later, shortly after, somewhat to my credit, another quote from the development blog is, "We were so busy cleverly solving so many other design issues that I think we may have missed the forest for the trees." And we had to eventually confront the fact that Alec and I were the only two humans alive that could actually play the game. So as a side project, we started wondering about, like, well, how would a game like this work on tablets? Like, it's technically playable on other platforms, but there's no way that this would work on a tablet. That's kind of where we were doing a lot of our business at the time. So I started thinking about, like, whoa, we could make something really different. Maybe it's like a mini game or a side game. There's this cool indie game called Anomaly by the guys that just did This War of Mine. And their iPad version actually kind of has really different gameplay. It's really neat. So we started thinking about, how do we take this game, make it turn-based, put it on a smaller grid, like that 868 hack game that's super smart. What does that look like? So we already sunk a bunch of time into this digital prototype, so I thought maybe I can detect awesomeness/failure better or faster with a paper prototype. We'll really cut out the fat on the design. This turned out super promising. So in a weekend or so, we jammed out this new, like, fully playable prototype based on all these new ideas. We iterated, and this time last year, we essentially had a brand new game. So we fully committed to that real-time game with the controller, gamepad thingy, and at the end of 2013, and by this time last year, 2014, we had this brand new turn-based game that we brought to GDC. The core idea of this game is still to build traps to stop invaders, but it's boiled down to a really simple A-B choice every turn. Build a trap or trigger a trap. You can't do both in one turn. So you can place a thing. It's sort of like, this is like one of my smartest game designs ever, right? Because it's literalizing this whole idea of long-term investment versus short-term investment, which is kind of like one of these big underpinnings of a strategic game design in general. And every time you do something, the guys hop forward. It's sort of turn-based tower defense-y kind of a thing. Man, so smart. So smart. And it had like a series of tutorials where it would, like, here, just build a bunch of these, see how they react, see how these guys come out, what happens, experiment, learn. The response was actually really positive. We sent this out to a bunch of game designers. Really well-known, highly rated GDC speaker described it as Spelunky for old men, which I think is positive. I consider it to be positive. We had a world map. We had, like, all this lore. So we killed that. That was considered not worth continuing. So I'm going to use Spelunky for this example, but there's a lot of games that I love, like 868 Hack, like we showed before, that I think are perfect representations of this idea. For me, one of the magic things in Spelunky is something that I'm going to call unpacking. Unpacking is the process of figuring out what went wrong when you died in the game just now. So this is from the Yet Another Stupid Death wiki for Spelunky. It's super good. And the process of unpacking is sort of like reverse engineering something. So you can see the end product, and you know some things about how that product came to be. Can you use that information to update your mental model and produce better results? And I call that unpacking, for better or for worse. And I think it's really massively important for one of the game genres that I love the most, which is failure games. These are games where you die a lot or lose a lot or whatever, and in doing so, you learn and improve, and this is very satisfying. And unpacking is like the most crucial part of these games functioning and finding their audience. So a lot of times these games get described as hard, and I think it's because they're very demanding, but they're also kind of weirdly generous because someone's gone through this game and put all this like time and energy into making sure that players are able to reverse engineer their failures in a way that's really satisfying. It's like their secret way of saying, like, yeah, it's hard, but it's not that hard. I'm giving you all these clues if you just know where to look. And we have there's this idea in games and in science and in a whole bunch of other things that we learn through failure. And that's bullshit. We learn through failures that we understand. And that's a really important distinction, I think. And so the thing that's tricky about this is most people that sat and played Portico really enjoyed themselves. And at the same time, they were having a lot of problems unpacking their experience playing the game. When they finished playing, when something went wrong, when they failed at the game, they did not have a set of ideas about what to try next time. I think in this particular game, this is due to a couple of weird mechanics in the game. Monsters because of the map size and some other things, monsters had to move 2 spaces at a time for the mazes and traps to add up right, rather than 1 space at a time. So there's a little bit of extra stuff to keep track of. On top of that, falling off of ledges is a thing that happens in a single move, because that was a really neat emergent property of doing a sort of platformer side view style tower defense-y experience. Really hard for people to keep track of. People were struggling to remember all the different kind of areas of effect of the different traps that they were building, and we couldn't really draw them all at once because you might have 12 traps on the screen. It was just like a huge mess. So what happened that we put so much time and effort into games that I consider now to kind of have deep flaws? Was it bad luck? Partially maybe. I think a big part of it was these kind of what I want to call poorly defined problem. We were solving problems left and right, but there's problems everywhere. And finding the right problems to solve is kind of its own weird skill in game development, I think. Designers spend most of their time solving problems, and so there are only consequences for solving the wrong problems when you're under time pressure. Portico kind of had no time pressure. Alec and I were just having fun making a thing that we liked. Maybe one of the reasons is that sometimes stuff just doesn't work. The thing about this is sometimes it's fun to build things even if they don't work. I was really, really happy working on this project the whole time, even though it was super busted. 2014. All told, we spent about 9 months on that version of the game. And even though it was dead, I kind of couldn't stop thinking about it. And then last fall, I was traveling a lot, and I started making these weird little prototypes when I was on the longer flights. So I had from takeoff until the laptop battery died to try and make something interesting. This is just for sanity's sake, right? The first of these was a Pac-Man 3's mashup called Stackman. You're welcome. This is as far as it got. When you press the arrow keys, that happens, and I still don't know why. It's super busted. I couldn't even program a grid. It was a disaster. So I went on some more flights. I was thinking about this busted old thing. I was thinking about this busted old thing. I was thinking about this one again. And then we started working on this thing that we've never shown publicly anywhere before, which is something I've been calling Portico Mini. So this was built in a couple of jam sessions. Partially on airplanes, partially at this game jam in France. And it uses actually some of the broken code from Stackman. And I tried to take all the things we love from Portico and defrag it as much as possible. So there's no such thing as monsters or traps. Monsters are traps in this version. There's only one action. You click on a thing. There's no room for confusing cause and effect. This started to open up new mechanics, like these guys can wear crowns, so you can't like click on them directly, which is kind of cool. This version also sucked in a lot of ways. So in France, I was jamming with Paul Vabre from Space Bear. They make this game called Kindo. And we started making the grid smaller and taking away swords and just taking out more stuff. And at this point, it became clear that something was going really right because the code for this game is terrible, but we could try new rules in like 10 minutes. And so we sat there for like 5 hours and tried 40 new things, and 38 of them sucked. But the 2 that were really good were a big deal. This is the least sucky version of this game to date at that time, which is really exciting. Hauled it back, did some more flights. My nephew Quinn, who's like 10, he really liked it, but he couldn't keep track of the color squares, so we started adding some icons. We started bringing back these like freeze trap things that were in the old Portico thing. I started losing track of all the mechanics and variations we were trying, so I do like 3 or 4 a night, because it would only take like an hour. So here's a quick tour of where the game is at now. It's got this like juicy stuff. I'm not adding sound effects to it, so I just keep adding more crappy visual juice things. But there's kind of like these blue monsters, and there's these yellow gems, and as you collect the yellow gems, you get to go to the next level, and there's these heart things that fill up. All the monsters are trying to get to the middle still. And you can click on the thing, you get your health back. There's these crowns, you can't touch those guys. And there's some like buried gems now, and there's these bombs that blow up, and those guys feel pretty good. Your gold is kind of the way you get to the next level, but it's also your high score. You can kind of min-max it. There's like this green slime stuff that hits guys. Those guys have shields. You have to click their shield to get rid of it. Red stuff is like, oh crap, you're about to take damage. That's not good. There's more of that green slime going on. There's like these like walls. You can like block off a path now. That's kind of cool. Oh, that's not good. Just use the debug like level skip key. Oh, there's trapdoors. You can click those trapdoors and the dudes fall in. That's super cool. Oh, those, yeah, pink things, they make the time go forward an extra step. Those guys are bad news. You want to throw them in the trapdoors because they're kind of trouble. And so on and so forth. I'm actually going to skip kind of the last. Oh, there's the archers, the spear guys. The orange spear traps from like the very oldest version are like back in, and they try to shoot you as they go by. Anyway, what did we learn? What I learned is if you just work hard and stick with it, you are guaranteed to succeed. That's a joke. That's a joke. All right. So there are some parallels between Portico and our main project Overland that do stand out to me. I have a really hard time focusing on solving the right problems if I don't have some kind of looming deadline. I don't know what to do about this right now except to keep making promises that I don't think I can keep and then somehow keeping them anyways, but that doesn't really seem ideal. This is the obligatory go slide. It turns out it's actually a really bad example of what I'm trying to say. So something we found on Portico and Overland is that often things that are really hard to build are also really hard for people to understand. So if something is hard to communicate in your design, it might be that it needs more juice. It might be that the idea itself you're trying to communicate is too weird, and usually it's both. So sometimes what you need is not hard work. It's time to figure out what's really wrong and then do the hard work to make the right idea click. Unpacking is super important. If people are supposed to be learning from their failures in your game, you need to make sure they can learn from their failures. This can be deceptively challenging to implement and design. It maybe sounds really obvious in retrospect, but in most challenge-based games, I think this is the top of the game design pyramid. You can have crap juice and crap controls as long as you do this part right. So what's next? I'm hoping for the best. I'm planning for the worst. That's kind of what we've been doing for a long time. Portico's code is still a disaster. It's also still very easy to try new things. I like a lot about where it's at, but it feels like it's missing something. I think that's okay. Thank you.